Okay, good morning again. Picking up from the last video, this is Poli-Sci 3050, United States Congress, Chapter 2. I'm Dr. Granger, and we're going to begin talking about the kind of self-defining concept of policy preferences. That is, it's not hard to figure out what this means, right? You have certain preferences. You agree or you disagree with certain policies, say abortion, death penalty, taxes, gun control, foreign trade, whatever it might be, immigration, etc., and so forth. And so we find out how people feel about policies based on public surveys, various means of figuring out, but mostly by surveys or polls that are conducted by newspapers, media outlets. What's called Gallup is a very famous and old polling company, as well as Pew Research, PEW, which is, again, very good for political research. Anyway, we can figure out what people believe. We aggregate individual answers into group answers. And so if you look at Table 2.1, this is on page 36 of the Congress textbook. On Table 2.1, we have how policy preferences can be aggregated at the district level. These are House of Representative districts, and also within Congress. And so we see, for example, District A, say, feels very strongly, let's say number 5 is in favor of a certain policy, and number 1 is in disagreement or in opposition. And that's strong. You ask people, okay, how do you feel about a policy? Yes or no, and then you ask them, how strongly do you feel? And you ask a variety of questions that allow you to come out with a scale and an answer, and then aggregate them at the district level. So as you see, we have 5 districts, and if you average them all out, they come out to a 3.0. Look at the second line, and you have their legislators' policy position. So let's say District A with a 5 is very strongly in favor of policy X. Well, the legislator is not. The person in Congress feels that perhaps this policy is bad for the country, bad for the district, whatever it might be. And so what we have is a pretty big disagreement there. We see that District C, they're pretty much right in line with each other. This would be kind of a delegate situation, perhaps, or it just happens that the legislator agrees very strongly on this particular policy with his or her district. And then we go to E, and we find kind of the opposite, but same situation as A, and that is, in this case, the district, we would say a 1 is very strongly against a policy, but here we find the legislator is very strong for it. So on a district-by-district level, we see some extremes of disagreement, kind of squeezed towards the middle where there is agreement. However, so you see there are big differences. District A, there's a 4-point difference. District E, a negative 4-point difference, and that's pretty big. But if you average out the districts, you come to a 3.0. If you average out the legislators, you come to a 3.0. And so we can say there is congruence in Congress with multiple districts aggregated together. So on a district-by-district level, we might say that there are some key differences here between the district and the legislator, kind of like the research you'll be doing for your District to DC paper. If you find that a legislator resisted a policy that his or her district approved of, or vice versa, you'll have this sort of situation. But again, studying one district at a time is interesting, and it's good if you want to dive into that district. But if you want a broader, like political science often does, kind of generalization, well, then you branch out beyond just one district. And of course, this can be done with all 435 districts in the United States. That will give you a very strong answer of how the country feels about an issue and how the 435 legislators in the House of Representatives feel. You could do it statewide by Senate as well, but again, we're focusing here on the representatives. So read up on that section very closely, and I think you'll find it sort of interesting. Various types of representation are then discussed in the chapter. For example, political parties. Now, this is probably one that we're most used to hearing about, and it does happen at a time where our political parties are fairly strong. That is, people have pretty strong identification. Now, there's a couple of things that have been going on for some time. On the one hand, a lot of people have abandoned either the Democrat or the Republican Party and consider themselves independent. They might have joined a third party, for example, a Constitution Party or Reform Party of some sort, or a Green Party, whatever it might be. But let's just say they're independent. They don't affiliate themselves with any political party on a formal level. They do not list themselves as a member of a political party. Well, right now we're at a situation where probably more people than ever declare themselves to be independent. Neither the Democrat Party or the Republican Party really hold a majority of Americans as, say, members, as affiliated members. So, perhaps 40% of the United States says it is independent. The people are independent. Well, when you look at their actual voting, they vote pretty consistently, either Democrat or Republican, and it has not always been that way. Even when we had fewer independents and we had almost everybody being either Democrat or Republican, we used to have a good number of crossover votes. That is, or what we call ticket splitting. You might vote Democrat for the House of Representatives. You might even vote Democrat for the Senate, but you might vote Republican for the president. On another level, you may vote Democrat for your governor and vote Republican for the people you send to Washington, D.C. I remember somebody in Oklahoma said they send Democrats to Washington because they'll send money home, but they vote Republicans at the state level because they'll manage the money better in their perception, in their particular opinion. So that's just, kind of an extreme example or an anecdote, but it's kind of an interesting story there. So political parties have changed in their strength and the degree to which people, either in the public or in Congress, are loyal to their parties. How many times does a congressperson vote with the majority of his party rather than, say, cross lines and vote with the other party? That has shrunk. That has limited to a great deal compared to, say, before the 1980s. From the 1940s through the 1970s, ticket splitting amongst the public was fairly common. That has not gone away completely, but it has diminished a great deal. Most people vote consistently. They vote what we call a straight ticket. That is, they will vote Democrat or Republican for president, the same party for House, same party for Senate, and probably the same party at the state level. And so Louisiana is a little bit of an anomaly in its recent history, and certainly in the South, in which it currently has a Democrat governor, what most people would consider a centrist or moderate Democrat. He has some actually rather conservative views on abortion and gun control. So he's not a very far left progressive Democrat by any means. He's a Louisiana Democrat, which has always been more moderate than, say, Democrats up in the Northeast in New England. Or New York or California. I don't know if a Democrat will replace Governor John Bel Edwards or not. It's quite likely the population will go back to Republican governors, as we have had for some time now, and which would bring it in line with our majority of our state representatives and the people we send to the United States Congress and the United States Senate. So political parties change over time. We might have a few things to say about that again a little later. Otherwise, there are organized groups. I want you to do something. Go to your favorite internet browser, say Google, and search for complete list of caucuses, CAUCUSES, complete list of caucuses in Congress. And one of the sources that I've already mentioned to you in the instructions for your paper, Ballotpedia, is a good source of information, and you'll see a complete list. And there are, we hear something about the Freedom Caucus, which used to be called the Tea Party, a very conservative caucus, mostly Republicans. We hear there is a progressive caucus of leftists. There's a black caucus, a Hispanic caucus, and an Asian American caucus. So some are based on race and ethnicity. But I believe I think I saw listed an asthma caucus. People were concerned about healthcare in that particular realm. You'll see, Google a complete list of caucuses in Congress, look at Ballotpedia, and you'll see just how many organizations there are in Congress. Most Congress people belong to multiple caucuses based on, again, a variety of issues, variety of identity factors, whatever it might be. So that is another way that people come together to share common interests, common ideas, and they help to develop policy. They help to develop legislation that is then offered or introduced into Congress, and maybe or maybe not gets passed by Congress and signed by the president ultimately. So both parties and caucuses are rather active. We're going to talk a little bit later about committees, and in particular what are called standing committees, and their role in Congress. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and close this out and start a new video actually on lawmaking, following along again with Chapter 2.